Hi guys, today I speak about Liew Walker. Liew Walker, its story. It's the history of the club, Corinthian Football Club. I I like very much Corinthian Football Club. Um, Liew Walker, what's the best moments of the history of Corinthian Football Club in your opinion? For example, great players or um, great victors. In my opinion, the great victor of the Corinthian Football Club it's Corinthians 11, Manchester United 3. And the great players, Andrew Watson, Joe Smith. Do you know also the history of Corinthians?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last bit, but what do I think about Corinthian Football Club?
Yes,
they're a complete phenomenon in the world of football. They not only spread the game around the world, they introduced the game to many countries. 1910, Sao Paulo being one of those momentous occasions when their influence created a club of such enormous stature as Paulista. But they were also the missionaries of fair play in football. They're in sport in general. The Corinthian spirit of playing the game for the enjoyment of playing it rather than for some for financial reward was one of the things that I love about the club. The idea that it's better to play the game than it is to win it or to make money out of it is a true Corinthian ethos that I think that it's almost lost these days with massive wages for players and being taken over by oil money. It's getting really crazy. To get back to something a little bit more simple and just enjoy the game for what it is, I think is a very Corinthian ideal.
and Leo, do you watch the FA Cup, Corinthian-Casuals, this week? But Corinthian-Casuals lost in the penalties. But what was that moment for you? It is a great moment. Corinthian-Casuals advancing in FA Cup, many faces.
Yeah, well, that was a moment in history for the club. As you know, Corinthian-Casuals is an amateur club. All our players play; they're not paid, so that makes them rather unique in English football or lower league football. Corinthian-Casuals play in the Isthmian League, where nearly all the teams in that league are either semi-professional or professional. They have huge wage budgets. Corinthian-Casuals doesn't. So for a fully amateur team to make it to they were within 1 or 2 goals and penalties of the first round of the FA Cup, it would have been an absolutely historic moment. And so you can understand how heartbroken we all are that it had to go to penalties. How heartbroken we all are that they didn't manage to do it this time. But there's always next year, onwards and upwards, as they say.
And Corinthian Football Club have the great victor, Corinthians 11, Manchester United 3. What was the moment in the history for you? Because Manchester United it's a great team in the world, and Corinthian Football Club won 11. It's a great moment in the history for you.
Oh yes, it is. It's a fabulous moment in history, and it reminds me of I was with Corinthian-Casuals in 2015 when we came to Sao Paulo, and the wonderful reception we got from Corinthians supporters there. It was an absolute. It was a wonderful week we spent down there, and none of us will ever forget it. But some of the conversations I had with the supporters then were saying, well, why didn't you turn professional back in the early days? If you turned professional back in '85, when the professionalism was legalized in England, you would be the Man United today. You would have, if you had taken on professionals and joined the league and played in the FA Cup and then played in the European Cup, you would be the Manchester United of modern times. But that wasn't part of the ethos of the club. It goes back to the club not entering cup competitions or paying wages but playing football for the sake of playing football. And that's what the club has always believed in. That's where it'll always be. And consequently, in these days, we're probably always going to be losing on penalties in a game in the FA Cup and hanging out in the lower end of the English League. But we stick to our principles, and that's important to everybody who supports the club.
And Liew, do you watch some games about Corinthians Paulista? Corinthians Paulista inspiration in Corinthians Football Club. What is it's great for you, Corinthians inspiration, Corinthians Football Club inspiration, Corinthians Paulista?
Well, I must confess that although I try and follow the successes of Paulista, I'm not as up to date on it as I should be. But I have to say that every home game we have in Tolworth, there are always a crowd of Brazilian Corinthians who show up to the game wearing their Paulista tops and singing and dancing and making a lot of noise, and so it always feels like we're back in Brazil again. We're never very far away from Paulista, our brothers in Sao Paulo, and it's wonderful to have a little bit of Sao Paulo come to England and come to watch our games. We're inordinately happy to welcome our Brazilian brothers and sisters.
The great dream of the Corinthian-Casuals, it is Corinthians Paulista's visit Tolworth. It's a great moment, in my opinion. Corinthians visit England. Do you know that moment?
Oh, that would well, for a start. We probably wouldn't be playing at our home ground. It's very small, and I think that if Paulista ever came to Britain, there'd be the major Premier League clubs would be falling over themselves to arrange friendlies. So it would be us versus Manchester United would want to play you. The Chelsea would want to play you. Manchester City would want to play you. Rangers in Scotland would want to play you. And, maybe you'd be able to fit in some time to play little old Corinthian-Casuals in Tolworth. But, if you ever came to England, it would be a wonderful, it would be a carnival.
Do you know great players of the history of Corinthians Paulista? For example, Ronaldo Fenômeno and Neto, Sócrates, Marcelinho Carioca, Rivelino. Do you know great players of Corinthians?
Yeah, well, I'm of an age that I can remember the 1970 Brazil team, and when I was in Sao Paulo in 2015 with Corinthian-Casuals, I sat in the executive box next to Rivelino, and I couldn't speak to him. I was so in awe of such a great football player from my childhood. Who I remember watching him play in 1970, and thinking he was just the most brilliant player I'd ever seen. Mind you, that most of that Brazil team from 1970 were entirely brilliant. Socrates is an idol. He is more than a football player. He's a leader, and someone who made football. He used football for change, and there's a special place in heaven for people like Socrates, I believe, for what he did. Ronaldo. Yes, there's too many to mention, isn't there? Really.
Ronaldo is a great player of the Corinthians actually recently. uh, do you know Arena Corinthians? What do you know Arena Corinthians? Arena Corinthians is a great stadium. How was that moment for you visit Arena Corinthians, Corinthian-Casuals?
Oh my goodness, that stadium was just is awesome. It was. I mean, luckily enough, because I was with the Corinthian-Casuals, I was kind of allowed to wander around and look at the murals in the tunnels, and just look at the whole stadium was just an amazing experience. And I have to confess that there was at one point when no one was looking, I bent down and I kissed the grass, because it's part of England now. So that you have to remember that grass in the Arena Corinthians is now part of England. Okay, so you have to remember that. Okay.
And do you know other, for example, other local Parque São Jorge? Do you know? It's the old stadium of Corinthians.
Yeah, I do. I've seen the footage of Chris Watney that showed me of the game that was played at the old Park St George, and we went there to see the futsal stadium, which is nearby there, and it's wonderful. It really is. It's the idea of having a football club that is part of a sports club where there's many other sports there. There's swimming pools there were just unbelievable. To have a sports club as a center of a community like that is what I would very much like us to be at Corinthian-Casuals here in Surrey. I'm the chairman of the youth section, and we have like 30 teams, 350 families that play for us and wear our colours. And I would love it to be more than just a football club. I would love it to encompass all different sorts of sports, but all played for the pleasure of playing rather than anything else. It's Park St George was and the garden with the statues in was also very moving as well. I thought.
Do you know about fans of Corinthians? Corinthians have great music in your. Not our fans have great music. Do you learn some music about Corinthians? How was that moment for you?
Well, getting to we were invited to the Gavios warehouse for carnival preparations, which was just an amazing experience for us. I mean, yes, and there's lots of different different groups of Corinthians fans over there, and they're all welcome to come to London to see us. It would be great to have even some of them come so we can repay the wonderful hospitality that we received when we were down there. So yeah, that would be very, very special to us.
What's the most rival, in your opinion, in the history of Corinthian Football Club or Corinthian-Casuals? Actually, it's Kingstonian, but I have Preston North End, for example, Chris Whitening, coach for me, Carlin Tal. What's the most rival of Corinthian Football Club in the history, or Corinthian-Casuals?
Well, the biggest rival you're saying? The biggest rival? Well, you can't really call it Kingstonians, even though we share a ground. Before Corinthian merged with Casuals Football Club, the Casuals Football Club used to use Kingstonians' ground. This was after the First World War, and Casuals would play their home fixtures at Kingstonians' ground. So for them to play at our ground, 100 years later, seems to be perfect sense. So I think that there's a long history of us and Kingstonians working together and playing together. But I wouldn't say that was a rivalry. There's too much respect there, I think, between the two clubs. Goodness, that's a question. You'll have to let me go away and think about that. I can't think of any other real rivals for us. I mean, in comparison for history, I don't think there is another club with a history like ours. Oh no, I'd say there is one other club with a history like ours, and that would be Queen's Park in Scotland. The most influential club in Scotland, the best club in the world for a long period. They invented the passing game, which is something that the Corinthians learnt from them, and it was that passing game that the Corinthians took around the world, which founded modern football. So yeah, I think that Queen's Park and Corinthians are the two most important teams in football history, I think.
Corinthians have other victories, great victories. For example, Corinthians 5, Liverpool 2, Corinthians 6, Tottenham 1, Corinthians 7, Aston Villa 1. What's the great other victory about Corinthians? And would you like coach for me?
The greatest victory, I think, is the one that announced Corinthians to the world. And that was with the subject of the book that I have just written about Andrew Watson, that is available on all good market outlets. But this was it was the third season after the foundation of the Corinthians, and they hadn't done very well in the first season. They lost more games than they won. The concept behind creating the Corinthian team to produce players of a sufficient standard to play for England, it didn't seem that project was working very well until Nicholas Lane Jackson took over the running of the club, and then he realised that the way to get to create better players was to play the best teams. And so his theory was that he would take this group of players, this group of Corinthians, and he would tour the north of England, where all the professional teams were, all the best teams in England were: Preston North End, Blackburn Rovers, Burnley, Aston Villa. All of those teams, he would take a team of Corinthians north, and in December 1884, he took the Corinthians north, and Andrew Watson was in the squad, and they arranged a fixture with Blackburn Rovers, who were the current FA Cup winners. They were ipso facto the best team in England at the time, and they won the FA Cup the following year as well. So they were a good established team, and Corinthians beat them 8-1, and it was such an astonishing result. No one could believe it. But it was, this was the best team in the world being beaten by a group of amateurs that had come from the south. It was an astonishing result, but it announced the arrival of the Corinthians, and so I think that one game is probably the most important game that they played. Second most important game, of course, was the one in Sao Paulo in 1910.
The great moment of Corinthians Football Club, for example, have inspiration Real Madrid, shirt of Real Madrid. What's the great memory for you?
I would like to think that it was the Corinthian spirit. We talk about the Corinthian spirit. Most people would probably identify it as the Olympic spirit. It's the same thing. It was just renamed back then, but I think that the idea that you can play a game just for the fun of it, and that you can become very, very good at it by enjoying it, to me is probably the most important gift that the Corinthians gave to football, and it's really important these days that we coach that into our kids coming through. They've got to play football first and foremost because they enjoy it, not because they want to be Premiership players or make lots of money and be rich and famous. They need to play because they enjoy it, and if they enjoy it, they'll get better. And as they get better, all those things will happen to them. But I think that it's very important that the Corinthian ethos is brought into the coaching of young players, and yeah, I think that's what I like to think is the greatest legacy of the Corinthians, apart from, of course, taking football around the world, introducing football to every continent. Every country now plays football, and the Corinthians had a hand in that. That's really quite an important legacy. I think that the world needs to recognize and understand.
And the vestige symbol, the first of Corinthian Football Club, I have the symbol Corinthian Football Club. What's the great for the history of Corinthians vestige symbol? Because have the linkage of Queen. I know.
Sorry, I don't understand that. What is
the symbol of the Corinthian Football Club?
Yeah.
What's the great importance? For example, I know that symbol have condecorated for the Queen. I right? The Queen of England.
The Queen of England. Oh, I'm sure she's never heard of us, to be honest. I no, what you're saying, I think, is that, and it's not that one behind you. That's the logo of the Corinthian Football Club.
Yes.
In 1939, the Corinthian Football Club and the Casuals Football Club, who were two great amateur sides of the previous years, merged to become Corinthian-Casuals, and then they had a new logo created. And in 1958, I think it was, the logo was granted a crest by, say it was the Queen, but yeah, we're the only football club who's got a crest that I can't remember who the organisation is, but yeah, we're the only football club with one of those.
Do you have Premier League team, for example? Do you watch Premier League team, for example, Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, or only Corinthian-Casuals?
No, that's no. Yeah, you've got Corinthian-Casuals, and that's the team that you. Well, I see. I'm a historian, and I spend most of my free time researching the club, trying to find out more about it. But tonight at 8 o'clock London time, my team, West Ham United, are playing in the
Premier League, or
no, they're playing in the. Oh God, it's the European, the minor European trophy, but we haven't been in Europe for many years, and I mean, we talk about the greatest Corinthian ever, which we want to talk about the greatest Corinthian ever. I think the greatest gentleman of English football ever was Bobby Moore, and he was West Ham. He was a West Ham player, and I grew up watching Bobby Moore, and he was considered then and now as the perfect English gentleman when he played football, and he played in the style of the Corinthians. To me, he was a Corinthian. And that's that wonderful picture in 1970 when England played Brazil of Bobby Moore and Pelé in each other's arms, which is an iconic picture of football and what football's all about. Two people who fought for 90 minutes to try and win a game, fought against each other, and then at the end of the game they come together and they throw their arms around each other out of mutual respect. I think that's an iconic picture in the history of football. And Brazil and England, it's always the best match in the world, isn't it, when it happens? So anyway, West Ham tonight, yeah, the Irons.
Do you know Rivellino? Rivellino played with Pelé, and the CBF and Corinthians, the selection team of Brazil won in 70 years World Cup. Do you know Rivellino?
Yeah, I said, I told you earlier that when we played, when Corinthian-Casuals played Corinthians Paulista in 2015, I sat next to Rivellino up on the balcony, and I was so in awe of him that I couldn't speak to him. I wanted to shake his hand, but I just was just, oh my God, there's Rivellino, and he's sitting right next to me, and I froze. I froze. It was just I do know Rivellino was a hero from my childhood, very much so. Yeah.
Liew, I would like to thank you for that interview. Do you like promote your author, for example, book, for example, your media, social media? Do you like promote?
Well, now I can do this. That's my new book. Where are we? There's the camera. Andrew Watson, A Straggling Life. He was the gentleman who bought the Scottish game to Corinthians in 1882 and helped Corinthian become the club that they were. And he also, because he taught the Corinthians and the Corinthians taught the world, this man is the most important footballer of all time. And he was a Corinthian. So yeah, please, it's on Amazon, so you can get it there.
And thank you. Do you know history of the Corinthians Paulista? I have the contact of the Corinthians Paulista. I would like a link at Corinthian-Casuals with Corinthians Paulista. Corinthians Paulista. It's very important. Do you know? Do you have a contact with the Corinthians Paulista history?
My contact is Chris Watney, who you've already interviewed, because of Chris's contacts with Brazil and Sao Paulo and Corinthian Paulista. He knows everybody, and there is a gentleman. There's an archivist in Sao Paulo, but I haven't spoken to him, and perhaps that it's time to do that and to discuss, especially to discuss this guy. But yeah, so yeah.
Thank you for the interview, Liew. I forget any words because I study English yet, but do you like the conversation? But I forget any words because I study English, but it's a
hey Leonardo, hey Leonardo, your English is 100 times better than my Portuguese. Okay, it's been great. It's been great, and I understand what you're saying, and it's marvelous. But if I had to speak Portuguese, forget it. It would never have happened.
Interview. Thank you, Liew.
You're very welcome, Leonardo. It was really good to speak to you.
Okay, thank you, Liew. And I finished that interview. Vai Corinthians.
Hey, vai Corinthians. Yeah, definitely.